Hey everybody, it's the Spinner Rack, and we also have
Alvin Ellis ready to rock.
Superman. Whether we loved it or we thought it was okay, it seemed to make money. It made over $600 million in the theaters.
Yep, 615 in the theaters. And but what's the meme going now? The meme going now is that it didn't make any money. It wasn't profitable.
Well, Forbes. Who else would know more about money than Forbes? If
Uh,
Forbes
Marz, but he's not here.
if Forbes doesn't know about money, then what else?
Oh, what does Forbes have to say?
Well, ultimately, the idea is that they're trying to say that these numbers are matched into their streaming and all this other stuff. So they're
The
trying.
615 were matched into the streaming?
Well, they announced that, but then they also said, "Hey, there's some other things." There's then they brought up the cost of the movie, right? So they
Yeah.
give you the numbers here. They try to show you what the numbers are, and these are the theater numbers. The only theater numbers, right? So if you present the theater numbers, you can't factor in anything else. But they say it also had a production budget of 225 million, right?
Hmm.
And then a marketing budget of 125 million, right?
Right.
So then they're saying, look, they're making you do the math in that and saying, hmm, that's a little, that cuts into that money, and maybe it's getting kind of fuzzy. And then they say, given that films generally split ticket sales 50-50 with the theater owners, which is wrong. It is totally wrong.
Well, correct them. Correct them, Petey. Correct them.
I have the greatest, most successful movie possibly ready that hasn't been put out yet. I put it to the theaters and I pimp slap the theaters. And I say, I get 90, you get 10, and you find the rest, and that 10 comes from your popcorn too. I get that some of that too. So I'm getting that all that money is coming to me, right? And then as the weeks go on, it goes to to 80 to 70 and then finally to 50. So the movie people are making the most amount of money from there, and the theaters are making less. But people do not factor in the total amount. If we factor in the total amount of money to the thing of what the split is between the movies and the theaters, that changes the whole dynamic. The whole, even if you factor that in, it would change the whole dynamic, and that means the movie people are making less money because the theater people make money. That would affect everything. And when way you do math is you don't create a math problem for one thing. You do it for every movie across the board, and that will cut into everyone's movie. So this start of the premise is totally wrong. It does not. The ticket sales in the theaters do not split. They never split. They come in, pimp slap them. You take this, we get 90, you get 10, and then it gets to the, and that's why you see certain movies like what's that movie the one with the girl, we were talking about Greek stuff from the A Big Fat Greek Wedding. The theaters are like, hey, this is making money, we're not taking it out. And the idea is like the image idea. Let's take this out for number one weekend, but they're saying, hey, this thing is still making money, and we get a majority of the profits now, or we're splitting it now. Why would we take this out the theater? So some theaters work with people as it goes along, and that's why you see some movies never leave the theaters because they're like, why would we get rid of it? We're making a better split at the end, and at the same time, the movie people don't care because they're like, okay, yeah, we still get some money out of it, but if you do this kind of math, it throws everything off. So that's my piece. I'm throwing it
Well,
back to you.
no, that's good. I'm glad you brought that in because a lot of people forget. They know all the other. I think most people know the basic movie math, which is okay, whatever they spent and double it, and if they made that much money, okay, then the movie was profitable. But with this particular movie, because you have a lot of guys who are looking to troll, all of a sudden, the standard became a lot. The standard shifted. It's like no, no, no. It's going to be compared to this movie. with inflation and all these other particular things. But I'm glad you, because I'm glad you threw that in. Because they're like, oh no, what about like, no, no, no. They're gonna, because I think at one point, Superman 2025 was even late in the theatrical run, it was still averaging like about $1 million a day.
Mm-hmm.
Which is fine. These guys are like, okay, and then you see where the split is. But these, they're coming like, no, no, no. Initially we're taking all the money,
Yeah.
and then the longer the run, the more you guys make money. So that's one. But then the other thing was, I think it was 615 million in theaters, and it didn't its run didn't stop because it wasn't successful. It was in theaters for over 80 days, so obviously it was successful, but it didn't stop because it wasn't successful. But they had the digital release coming out, what was that, August 15th?
Mm-hmm.
So you don't want to negotiate against yourself. You don't want the digital release, and then you got the thing out in theaters and people are like, where do I spend the money? Because again, I'm going to get more money for the digital release.
Yeah.
I don't have to split that with the theater. So that's one thing. And then you had this, you had streaming as well. But on every metric, this was a successful movie. Okay, you had the critical response, you had the audience response, you have the money. Okay, even with the money that they spent on marketing, there was a lot of money spent for this movie. There was a lot of money spent for this movie. But these guys, I mean, I'll save my coup de grace for where it should be coming in. But they spent, I mean, I'm certain you're going to agree. There was a lot of money spent in terms of marketing.
Yeah.
Between the film. Do you remember that thing they did where they had like they had like a life-size Superman statue at this top of this building in London? That's a lot of money.
Mm-hmm.
That's a lot of money.
And we don't factor that in when we go into, and I'm saying it, and I've been saying it all the time. Barbenheimer was marketing.
Mm-hmm.
News stations talking about his marketing. So however that got to that billion is however amount of money to get everyone to say. And that used to be the basic movie marketing, is that you would not just have a Siskel and Ebert or your movie reviewer reviewing it. You would have the people talking about it. I always go to, that's what almost killed us wanting to see as even a rental, the Terminator. I'll be back, and the news reporters would do that, but it's also part of marketing. So you can get, I mean, us being on the inside is some sort of, it doesn't always help, because at the same time the theaters work on a different metric, whereas at the same time it could get to at some point where the split, because I'm pretty sure it doesn't, I'm not sure if it goes all the way down where it goes, the movie people make more lower. I think it kind of stays at 50, but if it goes lower where they can get a lot more towards the end, I think that you're just crazy that they would do this and say this, and after, at the same time they're on the other side pointing out all the great, critical successes of Marvel movies, because DC is banking on James Gunn. They already showed that with the TV show and with Suicide Squad. So they're not pulling away from this. They're not saying a bad movie and they're leaving. They're saying we're going with this. This is successful. This isn't the other movie. And well, now we're not going to...
No, because you have this dual narrative going on since this movie came out. It's either a great movie or it's a terrible movie. It made money. It didn't make any money. It had a successful run. It did not have a successful run. And it's strictly because you got these trolls.
Mm-hmm.
But Forbes, I have to admit, I'm surprised at, because Forbes is saying that they had like Forbes, their numbers are different than what I saw before. But they're saying that they had like a overall budget of 350 million. They're the first. I didn't see that anywhere else besides them. So somehow they tacked on like an additional 20, 30 million.
Yeah.
That wasn't necessarily there before. But I know how the movie math works. There's one formula where you double. There's another formula where you take it. You take whatever the production costs are, and it's supposed to be multiplied by like 1.5, and that's the number that you need to make, at the end of the day, to break even. However, and this is what I'm sorry, you Snyder guys out there, but this is going to be the coup de grace. It's getting a sequel. It's getting a sequel. I don't know how many unsuccessful movies, get a sequel. But here's the thing. Man of Steel, which is the movie they want to use as the litmus test, as the barometer, as the standard. Man of Steel made more money. Man of Steel, according to them, was more profitable. So, but Man of Steel did not get a sequel. There was no Man of Steel 2. What's more, okay, and you can quote me on this, Man of Steel is on permanent hold. Please understand what that means. That is a slap in your face if you don't understand what that means. The movie, the sequel that you're waiting for, is on permanent hold. Okay? That's the polite way of telling you this is never going to happen. But you figure it out. So for all the money that it made, no sequel greenlit. Okay, Man of Steel falls into the same. Henry Cavill did get to reprise his role as Superman after Man of Steel, but Man of Steel falls into the same category with Superman Returns. No sequel. This movie, however, is going to have a sequel, has been greenlit a sequel, and the sequel will be out in July 7th, 2027. So then, of course, you would have to answer the question, well, why does an unsuccessful movie, why does an unprofitable movie get greenlit for a sequel? And then you have to look at all the other positive evidence about the movie. And you're like, okay, I sincerely doubt this movie was a loss for them. I'm not saying that it was, the biggest profit ever, but this movie was more, this movie is a bona fide success for them that they're going to move forward. It was everything that they needed it to be. If it had made more money, I'm sure they'd be even happier. But with all the baggage that it had from the previous universe and such, that it did this well, they're very, they're very, very pleased with it. They're going forward. I don't quite understand the angle of the Forbes article because it just came out about 5 days ago.
Mm-hmm.
But who knows? Maybe they didn't have anything else to write about.
Well, yeah, I don't know. It feels like someone slipped their money under the table because the Superman movie. It's like what was it? The scene in Police Academy 2 where they say the guy who's from the actor who played Johnny Fever. Says he's playing a cop and he's like, "We're gonna go out there. We're gonna stop the crime," and they go out and stop the crime, and then the other police chief comes in and says, "Yeah, that was a little, you roughed up the person. All these things have to go away." And it's like, what? We're trying to do a good job, and he's like, "No, all these things will get overturned, and all the criminals are going back home. They send everybody out the street and turn it to bedlam." I don't think that this thing of taking the air out of the tire now and trying to explain to us stuff that makes no sense, and at the same time,
It contradicts themselves. These guys said that Superman was a success initially. What's that?
yeah,
No, what was this back in? Well, this would have to be like around July or so.
hmm
Yeah, but yeah, you go back around like late July. Forbes is like Superman soars high. All of a sudden now it's like they don't know how to do math. Oh, we misplaced the decimal point.
it'd be like way in comic books, it's like saying, well, the X-Men sold 450, you know, 450,000 a month, but they have to throw away 150 thousand issues that they made. All that they didn't sell those issues. It's like, no, but that's how the comic book business works. It's like people they just want to give you some a little bit of tidbits of talking about stuff, and at the same time, you can't always count on just get into the business done right. The marketing people do well and they do their jobs. So getting too much inside baseball, trying to add all this stuff in there and say, oh, it's 350, and then something else, there's another cost, and then they're banking on their streaming thing. That's why I went to streaming already. It's just like, yeah, no. The thing is, the hard part is people would make money, not make money in the theaters, and it would be a hit in streaming, and then they would still have a hard time saying, can we do a sequel to this thing? Here's our numbers on TV and DVD and streaming, and people would be like, well, not they had a bad opening weekend. Like, no, the people are still talking about it. So, well, we'll use those guys, but we don't want to do another thing. So,
Yeah, it was the highest Superman. Yeah, Superman was the highest grossing. Uh, I can't remember exactly, but I know that, no, it wasn't the highest grossing domestic film, but it outgrossed Jurassic World Rebirth. if that was the title, it outgrossed that movie domestically, and it outgrossed it by like well over $10 million the last time I checked. So it wasn't like, again, I'm trying to understand their numbers altogether, because I look at the total and I know there's a formula that we get, but then you have to throw in the numbers that you're talking about. So I'm like, okay, so they would have definitely got the lion's share of that. And I know abroad the split is better.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I know
And that,
abroad, the split is better. So I'm like, okay, these guys probably took in more than enough money. But again, and then I know how they want to do. They want to do exact word fallacy. We only want to use the theater numbers. That's all that matters. Why? Because that's how we win. We think we can beat you up with the theater numbers. We don't want to talk about that extra money. We don't want to talk
yeah,
about that free money they got. No, no. We just focus on the theater numbers. But when I'm looking at this, I'm like, no, I'm like, okay, I'm like, I don't understand how they're getting this, because I did these numbers. It was very easy to predict how much money Superman was going to make before its theatrical run ended. It wasn't pulled from the theaters, but it was going to stop here. And that should also let people know that, hey, they had a definitive date for this run.
yeah.
Okay, they knew when they were going to start it, and they knew where they were going to stop it, because like, okay, we're going to stop here, then we're going to go, we'll do the digital release, then we're going to do streaming. That's how this is going to roll. So, this is pretty much, unless this film was doing like just insanely well, where people were like running to the theaters trying to break the doors down, like we're going to see it. It was going to come out of the theaters at that particular date. So, they went. I don't know. I feel like I'm trying too hard to justify this when it's obvious that the movie was financially successful for Warner Brothers, because now you would have heard it. And the biggest thing we would have heard, it would have been James Gunn and let go has been let go. And the universe pretty much is dead. But the fact that you have the sequel and you have the interest, yeah, it was, without a doubt, it was successful. But man, what can you say? Do you remember how? Do you remember Heat from the
Yeah.
1990s? Those guys who wanted Hal Jordan to come back.
Hmm.
What was it? Hal's Emergency Action Team, something like that. And when they came out, I was just like, okay, I thought they were just a bunch of nuts. I still do. But those guys hung on for 10 years. They were on for 10 years. Kyle Rayner could never get a break from those dudes. They hung on for 10 years until finally Hal Jordan was back. I was like, wow, people can really moan and complain. And it's like, if I hold my breath long enough, I'll get what I want. They held their breath for 10 years. So I'm looking at this now. And I'm like, dude, it's going to get a sequel. More than likely, the sequel's going. Yeah, I mean, all things considered, the sequel's probably going to be received very positively, because this one was. And then the short, where it fell short in terms of international, probably not going to be the same thing coming around. And other people have already had a taste of the first one and realize, oh, okay, we can go and enjoy ourselves. The second one I expect will do better than this one. So what's your argument going to be then? Oh, it didn't do as much money as, it didn't do as much money as, I don't know at this point. But it's just a lot of hate. Thanks, Forbes.
Yeah. Well, the thing is to make this dissension go. So get the people to you know, get people to decide, oh, maybe it didn't, maybe it did. Who knows what's going on over at Discovery slash, all these other companies. So, the thing is, um, don't try to do the fuzzy math type of deal. Point out some numbers, point out this, and just say, hey, it costs this. The marketing is this, and it's just like, you know what? We don't get to know the box office numbers and the merchandise numbers. Are the only time we knew about merchandise numbers really was that George Lucas was a quadrillionaire, and it wasn't supposed to happen. They didn't, the movie makers didn't really think the toys were going to do anything, and George Lucas made a toy out of everything. So it's like, and they're like, oh, we didn't know that. Now they'll never let that kind of thing happen, So, this thing, it's just tough to be in the place where you're supposedly reputable, a magazine, and at the same time you're online, and you to carry that on, and then you just get contributors who just add in stuff. And I always go to that where it's kind of like, I think Aziz Ansari was trying to talk about that movie where the robot and the Indian guy is actually a white guy, And he was like, I talked to him and I had this moment. And it keeps, Aziz is contributing to this thing. And he's saying, the guy was like, I'm going to do my best to be the best Indian. And I'm going to do all the study and all this stuff. And it's like, yeah, on one hand, you could say that. But at the same time, if the contributor did his work, you know what I'm saying? That same guy played like he played a Mexican or Puerto Rican who chasing after some girl in this movie with what was it called? It was this weird movie, but he's now a big time director. He directed the thing with David Beckham, but the guy did like two, ethnic characters, one not offensive, one super offensive. But the story, whatever your story is, you have to follow through, and that's not what we expect from Forbes. We expect basically the truth, not tailoring your story to what it needs to be. So this is the problem. We don't want to see some stories where you decide, hey, it didn't make its money back. We factored in, and we've done a bunch of episodes where we talked about some insider things and struggles different movies had to go through and how much they had to pay for things afterwards. But this is just going too far. They're doing this. He said he was doing Superman. They even changed the name so as to say, hey, we could just call it Superman because the first movie is Superman the movie. So we're just calling this Superman. They have it out there, and they've been running around smiles. And usually with a movie like that, yeah, I mean, it is promotion. So even if you hate each other, you're supposed to promote it. But they've been going around happy, and and hints of what's coming next have been talked about. So hey, we're saying, at least I'm going to speak for us, and then Captain Craig may not. We're saying this is all BS, and don't try to play the episode of the Flintstones with Hi-Fi, where Betty would destroy Fred Flintstone's career as Hi-Fi, was like, hey, Hi-Fi square, and the kids run out. Yeah, it wasn't successful. Trying to build dissension, like coming from the public, so when it comes to the next movie, nobody wants to see it. Don't fall for it. Use your heads, people. Any last words?
Don't go on Vlad. Don't read Forbes.
Wow, he's calling the Forbes out totally. All right, we did two things complaining. Well, we weren't complaining, but I was, about them doing the Marvel and pointing out Kamala Khan as the number one top rated, but least success. One of the least successful. I guess one of the other ones have been worse, but it's them selling us on Kamala Khan. Hey,
I used to read Forbes. I used to read. There was a guy there. I think it was like Mendelsohn. His
mm-hmm.
stuff used to be pretty good. He used to have some good insight. I haven't read them in a while, but I was like, they write this? Sorry, I'm out.
Yeah, it's a shame. All right, so don't check out, as per Cal, don't check out Forbes, and don't believe everything you read, and don't want to be into. We're not doing the Trump thing where we're saying to you it's fake news, but listen to this other fake news. It's just fake news, and we're waiting for the next Superman movie.
Yeah, I'm not trying to extend this further. It's literally. I mean, what is it? It's it's the second week in October. Film has been out of theaters for almost for over a month, well over a month, and now this article comes out. You just did the math now.
Mm-hmm.
You just did it now, and even then, when I look at your numbers, I'm like, wait a minute, this doesn't square up. I'm like, what formula are you using? The formula that gets us a headline.
Yeah, and the bigger fact is that who knows how much more it could have made without Marvel deciding to hop on its heels, and it still beat Marvel. So
well, even with that Marvel, I think even with the Marvel release, I don't even know if the Fantastic Four was number one that weekend.
Yeah.
I can't remember if they were. And then the drop off the very next weekend showed that the audience was like, all right, yeah, that was great. But we still have there's still a lot of interest in this particular film. And then Superman comes out on digital, number one. Superman goes to streaming, number one streaming. And then, it becomes this nonsense where they want to have this competition with Snyder. And they're like, oh, look, was it Rebel Moon? Rebel Moon had like 40 million viewers, and Superman 2025 only had 13 million viewers. Like, it was in the theaters, man. I was like, there was only one way to see Rebel Moon. You had to watch it on Netflix. Okay, there were at least three different ways to see the Superman film. I'm not sure why it is that it needs to do 60 million at the end of the day. And then they were only comparing the streaming. They weren't comparing, well, how much did it do in digital? No, 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 no. Let's just look at the streaming. Why? Because we think we can win that way. We think we can win that way. I was like, okay, can we do it over time? Like, no, no, no. We only gonna look at the first week. We're not gonna look at the long-term stuff at the end of the day. Because a year from now it could, outpace it, by 40 million. Oh, that doesn't matter. We just want to look at this particular thing. I'm surprised at Forbes. I really am. But
Well,
who knows? Maybe they'll I know that these guys have had it in for the head of Warner Brothers. Was Zaslav?
okay, yeah, yeah, so that's
Yeah, I don't know what it is. I don't know what it is he said or how they feel, but these guys are like, nah, he doesn't want to play ball, so we're not gonna give him good press. At the end of the day, if we can deny it, because again, Forbes is coming out with that ridiculous article. Hey, Kamala Khan #1. Like, what? How'd you do the math on that one?
mm-hmm.
One, what did you do? 1, 2, skip a few, 99, 100. How did you come up? How did you come up with that one? But hey,
Well,
you can't look at the reaction and the success of the film and somehow, well, this film has pretty much hit 10 on every market, on every metric that it needs to. Positive reaction, positive critical reaction. Made its money back and made its money back and then some. Look at the especially when you look at like the licensing agreements and such. I know it made a ton of money there. Then you look at the streaming, you look at the digital, and yet somehow this movie is somehow you come up with a thing like this is in the hole. Nobody believes that.
well,
you know and then you add like somehow you magically add like another 20, 30. You add just enough money so it's in the hole. Let's not add too much, just enough, just a pinch. There we
well,
go.
the thing is, what people, I think they're missing when the point they're bringing up of going to the digital numbers is like, if it was the old system where you'll have the movie, some time passes because they were feeling the reason why they were like they didn't want, they knew that right after the theater there might not be a complete quick rush to go see it, so there would be a delay, but at the same time doing it now because there's so much immediacy, it doesn't relate to say like, what's the number of the Seinfeld number is going to another platform. Oh, it hit a huge number again. Right now, what they have a statement. They say something's in profits. So when you're in profits, there's just more to the game. So you're not killing yourself and saying, well, why didn't this number get that? It's all going to the same place. That's what the end profits are. It's just like, okay, we're just putting all this money. They're not saying, hey, it didn't beat out, my best friend's wedding or something else on streaming or that just got put back on there. It's
Okay.
saying that, hey, this money's just going with the rest of the money right now. And we,
Oh, I think I got it. I think I got it. So this is what do they call this type of article? I know there's a name for this article. Let's just call it Bull Roar for right now, but I can't think of the name of it. But pretty much they're just, I think back like in July, they were trying to estimate what the marketing budget was.
Mhm.
And because at one point they were saying the marketing budget was as high as 200 million, which would be ridiculous because you'll never make your money back. Once you do that, you're putting the film like towards 500 million, which is like, okay, we can't make any money on this movie because even if it hits a billion, we're just breaking even. But at
we,
one point they were,
sorry,
yeah, go
go,
ahead.
go. I was just saying,
Okay.
is I would go to what's that guy? There was a director that looked at Half Baked, and he was friends with what's the name? He said, where did that money go? I want to see where the 250 million, what marketing genius put the 250 million into what? Where did that money go? Like, it was not enough trailers and whatever they would consider marketing, and I mean, I don't know. I can't
The
imagine.
marketing budget was estimated. I mean, the marketing budget was estimated to be anywhere from 125 to 200 million. And I think when James Gunn came out, he was like, no. He was like, I mean, he can't come over and say, no, our marketing budget was like, 80 million, that type of
Yeah,
stuff. He can't come out and give the actual no. He's like, no.
yeah.
They just don't do that. So that would be one. But then when you look at it, if that was the case, this movie would have been $350 million to make, which means it couldn't make a profit. unless it made $700 million. So at that point, this is just malpractice because if those are the numbers that you're working with. So then they were like, okay, well, those numbers can't be feasible. Let's like try to work with something a bit more, try to work with something that's actually a bit more realistic. But then they went back to it. They went back to the whole, it's got to be like 350 million. So they just decided to pick up on the old story and say, okay, well, it's a slow news. What is it? Slow news week.
Yeah.
Let's get these guys yapping. Okay. And thank you. You gave us something to talk about. But they went back to that number. And I know they quoted James Gunn saying, no way. No way. He was like, he said the movies don't make that type of money anymore. They don't. A good movie is like what, 400, 500 million? So you budgeting in there. Now, of course, with Superman, they're gonna, this is like the start of the universe. So they'll put a little bit more towards it. But literally, if you go by those numbers, it would have had to make $700 million in just to break even, which means you're aiming for $1 billion. You're aiming for $1 billion film, and he's already said no. He was like, they didn't do that, and they didn't need to make. That was the thing he was quoted with. He was like, they didn't need to make like 600, $700 million in order to be profitable.
Mm-hmm.
So and the Warner Brothers is not contradicting him. And the easiest way to contradict him would be to say, hey, we listened to you. You're fired.
Yeah.
You lost us a whole bunch. I mean, you lost us a whole bunch of money. $100 million in the hole. That's a lot of money. You're fired.
Yeah. And the hard part is they're not gonna do the Disney streaming is struggling because of trying to market new hotness. When obviously the closer most successful one that they had is Agents of Shield because it was a series that you can repeat and you can keep the budgets down instead of, well, they say, I guess we knew new talent. They use a total unknown for Kamala Khan, so maybe it didn't cost them that much. All this money was spent on wasn't it? But it's just sad. It's just sad that they're doing this, and it's sad that they would do, try to put off, I'm gonna go and put it to the lowest common denominator. You ever see my guy? He's the best guy. He breaks down the cultural bias. He goes up to mostly girls and say, "Are you smart or dumb?" And he he asks them a whole bunch of things, throws out a whole bunch of numbers and stuff you should be able if you have to pay attention. And this is what you do when you read these things, because a lot of times when it's on the internet and someone or a person says something, right? They say this has to be true, like or someone you like or someone you believe in is like this has to be true, and it's like when they start throwing out these numbers and then they throw out something that's totally iffy, like how can you go to the movie business and say it's a 50-50 with the theaters, and then we have to factor that in and then say, well, is everyone else factoring in the 50-50 split? That means, what the Barbenheimer is a 50-50 split, so it didn't make a billion. The theaters are making a billion too, like that sort of thing. It's like it doesn't, you can't, no one's sitting up there and saying, hey, um, Oppenheimer didn't actually make a billion. They had to split that 50-50 with the theaters. What are we doing here? It doesn't make any sense. So, it's just a, what do you, they just want to sit around here and they'll promote, if a movie doesn't do well and they think it's a good movie, they'll promote that it got awards. It's just what the movie business is. There's tons of movies that don't make any money and they get to do sequels. The actors get to move on to do other things. Josh Brolin has been in the biggest bombs ever. And it doesn't stop anything. It doesn't stop the companies. Then someone gets the idea that we need to tear down the Superman movie and and say we're gonna give you this fuzzy mask. So the thing is, when you listen to this stuff, and the hard part is that you have to look into some of this stuff to really understand that, and that's where it can be one thread, which would be the ticket split, to pull this whole thing apart and then say, why are you throwing all these crazy numbers at us? You're throwing all these crazy numbers to say they made this amount of money, 308 million, and that meant that the cost is more. That's their metric. to throw us off, right? Say it costs 350 million, and if we take the split from the theaters, we got 308, and then we say, nope, it failed. A lot of them, a lot of movies do, but this metric is the worst I've ever seen. So that's my last bit.
Well, I'll reiterate: don't go on Vlad. Don't read Forbes.
All right, spin a rack.
Yo, we're out.